Guys, welcome to the Ultimate Personal Trainer Podcast. Today we're going to go into programming for clients and programming for pretty much any goal and the interaction between three very important factors. They are rehab, function, and performance. These three factors will be involved in pretty much every single program that you will ever write if you are individualizing the program in some way for the client. Okay, so let's dive into it. Now, the first one that we look at is rehab. Because when we look at a client, when we come in, the first thing we want to do is look at their limiting factors, their constraints. So this is why we look at health conditions, because their ability to function at a normal level will determine their ability to function at an even higher level after that. So if someone comes into me with a really banged up rotator cuff, we know that that pain in that joint is going to negatively affect pretty much every upper body exercise. Like, it's not rocket science. The first thing that we want to be aware of is we need to make sure that we rehab, prehab, corrective exercise, whatever terminology you want to use. I'm using basic terminology. I know personal trainers aren't technically allowed to do rehab, although it happens every single day in every gym around the world. That's the kind of main thing that we're looking at straight away with our clients. So when we start working with clients, our first thing that we want to do is make sure that stuff works right. We want to make sure that we've removed the constraints to their performance. We're not doing it because of any other reason, but the fact that rehab or the need to rehab will constrain the ability to achieve optimal outcomes. I don't think anyone can ever argue that with me. Like, if you want to build your legs as big as you can, but you can't bend your knee, you're probably going to have a lot of problems and you're not going to get the progress that you need, that you desire. So we need to be a little bit smarter about this. Now, for me, the next part is function. Okay, so function is a little bit different to rehab. So function is, do we have good coordination of the movement patterns? Does the muscle work okay? Can we actually execute the thing? Can we do the function that we're intending to do? So function for me is not, training with tools that, like kettlebells upside down and Bosu balls and wrapping bands around every joint in the hope to distract the joint. That's not functional training for me. Functional training is making sure we can achieve the task that we want to do. So, for example, if the performance task that someone wants to do is get bigger muscles, particularly in hamstrings, I want to make sure they have the requisite neuromuscular function to do a Romanian deadlift or to do a lying leg curl, preferably both, because that's going to give me the best goal of improving their performance. The other thing is with function. Function is when we're not looking at rehab for performance constraints, we're actually looking at weaknesses, which you wouldn't actually say that there's actually an injury to that person. There's just something that's holding them back. So for example, in performance, if I'm looking at, the deadlift as one of my metrics of performance, right? If I see excessive rounding of the lumbar spine, and yes, I know the lumbar spine rounds on a deadlift. It's not rocket science. It happens. It's cool, whatever. But excessive rounding is probably not good because it leads to energy leakage and lower performance. That's why the best deadlifters wear belts, to help prevent that. If we see that, and then from there we can go to someone and give them good mornings or reverse hyperextensions or 45-degree back extensions to strengthen up their lumbar erectors, we can theoretically improve their deadlift by improving the function of their lower back. The same argument can be made for grip straps. They actually improve function in a Romanian deadlift because ideally your hamstring should probably be a little bit stronger in your hands. They're a little bit bigger. And then finally, performance. When we go to performance and we chase performance at the expense of function entirely, I'm saying entirely here, not a little bit. You can do 95% performance. You need to do some type of work for maintained function, and you may need to do some rehab the whole way through to help someone stay effective and healthy. Now, the degree of that will depend on the goal. So if we look at performance and the goal is just to lose fat and, drop a few kilos and feel good, we find that once we've done the rehab phases, performance and function can be like, 50%, 40%, and then 10% rehab, even less rehab, 5 to 2%, based on that individual person in terms of their overall volume of the program. If we're doing something like looking at someone who's competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a sport which is basically designed to damage joints, that's the point of it. That's how you win. You damage someone's joints, you put them in a position where it hurts and they tap out, or you choke them out. Neither of them are really healthy, not really. But I digress. We may do some rehab work in every single one of those performance programs to help build resilience of the tissues that are being targeted. We're not trying to bulletproof them because that doesn't exist, that it doesn't work at all, but you can't really make an argument that having stronger tissues in those areas that are commonly affected by that sport is a bad idea. I don't think anyone's ever been able to make a compelling argument for me. Even with something like basketball, doing high rep step-ups or backward sled dragging, for example, can help rush blood flow into the patellar tendon and build up certain parts of the quadricep. That will allow that client to recover better and be able to play more of a game. It's a small investment in time. The rehab is only 5%. What it does is it allows you to actually do the thing more, which gets you better towards your performance. So when you're looking at programming, how do we use this framework? The first step is to look at the client and go, are there any rehab, prehab, corrective goals that we need to hit? Is there anything that we need to do to be able to achieve that? Do they have any restrictions or constraints that are stopping them from achieving the performance goals that they want to do? From their function, do we have the capacity to do everything that we need to do to get the outcomes that we want? Really, really simple question. Do they have the capacity to do it? How can we build it up for them? And then finally, performance. What performance things do we need to do to get that person to goal? From there, when we're looking at performance, we're constantly analyzing their function to see if there's something that's holding them back. There's a constraint there. And then if they're doing a performance goal that leads to high levels of strain on a particular system, what kind of rehab, prehab, or corrective work can we implement into that person's program to make sure they can do the thing that they want to do for the longest time possible with the least amount of pain? Always being aware that the higher level performance we chase, the more likely we are going to have some degree of pain. This is the constant balancing act of programming at a high level for a client who has high level aesthetic, strength, or performance goals. There's always going to be a juggling act between these three things, because when people are pushing themselves to the limit, shit does go wrong. Load management isn't always the answer. Load management is super important, like don't get me wrong, but we also need to be able to create a training effect outside of load management as well. And that's where rehab, function, and performance is a really good paradigm to use in conjunction with the load management paradigm. Thanks heaps, guys. I'll see you soon.